Hey guys, today I'm going to be talking about something that I mentioned earlier, which is problem students and class discipline. And I know I didn't go into a lot of depth about it, and I had a couple of questions about it and just how I handled it and what it's like. So I'm going to talk about that for a bit today. If you have any questions that I don't cover in this video, please leave them below in the comments and I'll try to answer them. So first of all, I think that class discipline can be one of the most difficult parts of teaching, especially if you're a language assistant in the TAPIF program. I think it's the most challenging because sometimes, you can have fun lesson plans and you still have students who just don't care. And what do you do about them? It's a bit complicated. You have different types of problems. First of all, you have some students who really just are struggling with English, or they're just not good at English. And so for them it's difficult and they're not very motivated because it's just difficult. And you have other students who are either lazy or they just really don't care to learn English. So they make no effort at all. These are the worst types of students for me. If I have a student who really is just struggling and they're interested to learn but they're nervous, I try to talk with them when I talk to them individually and just make it very simple and don't make them feel intimidated. So if you have a student that's actually just struggling, just try to be more patient and take time with that student. And if your students are working in groups, spend some time when you're walking around the class. A lot of times I have my students do projects in pairs, and I walk around the class and make sure they're doing their work. If you have a student who's struggling, stop by their desk and spend some time helping them and encouraging them. So even if they just come up with the simplest sentence, tell them that it's a good job. The more problematic students, obviously, are those students who really just don't care to learn English, and I have a lot of students who are like this. You'll also notice there can be a big variation in the level of students within the same class, and I was really curious about this. I asked one of the teachers about it because I noticed I had some classes where most of the students were okay in English, and then you have like two who are pretty good because they're just more interested, and I have like two students who really don't know anything. And I'm just wondering, like, how can this happen that they got this far? And they start English so early, so most of my students that I have been studying English for at least 5 years. And I have some students who really just barely don't even know basic English. So I'm like, how can it happen that you've taken 5 years of English and you really still can't speak basic English? So I asked one of the teachers about how common it is to fail students and hold them back in the class and make them repeat a year, and she said that it almost never happens, which shocked me because in high school in the US, if you fail a class, you fail the class and you have to retake it if you want the credit for that class, if you want to move on to the next class. That's just how it is. Apparently in France, if you fail English class, you don't do well in the class, you still move on to the next grade and you take all the classes with the rest of your class, because their programs are organized in a way where you have all your classes with the same students every day. You have the same students in all your classes, and then they all move on together. So basically, it would be complicated for a student to stay behind in one subject. So it's just not common for them to do that. And she said a lot of parents will just say, no, I don't want my student to repeat a year, because they want their kids to feel good and they want them to continue and finish school. So there is a problem that a lot of students who don't care or just have a hard time in English, they keep getting passed to the next level of English, and that just makes it worse and worse for them. So if you have students who are in the class and really seem like they know nothing, it could be that they really don't care, or it could be that they just struggled and now they're just overwhelmed because they keep getting pushed to the next level every year and learning nothing. So try to figure out, first of all, identify with your students which is the case for them. That will help a lot in determining how to deal with difficult students. So yeah, you'll have some students who don't care to learn and they won't shut up in the class. That is the most common problem that I have, is students that just are talking and they don't pay attention. I had received a tip that if your class is talking too much and you're trying to speak, instead of yelling over them, you should just stop talking and stand there until they shut up. I tried this technique with my classes. The first few times I tried it, it worked really well. I stopped talking and they're all like, oh, what's happening? And they stopped and they looked at me. After you use this technique a few times, they tend to stop caring. So it is a good technique sometimes. I wouldn't rely on it, because then I began to think, okay, now I know how to make them be quiet, but it didn't work every time. So just a thought on that technique. Let's see, what else? Oh, the biggest problem I've encountered as far as discipline goes is when you're an assistant, you don't give grades and you don't give homework. This is really problematic because this is a big part of discipline in the school setting. You can tell your students that they're going to have a homework assignment if they don't behave. But since I don't give grades, I can't give them a homework assignment. I mean, I could, but if they don't do it, what's going to happen? Nothing. Like, I don't give them a grade, so it doesn't matter. So that is the biggest problem, because there's not a lot to work with as far as motivating them. So that can be difficult. If you're working as an assistant and you're working closely with other teachers, you can ask the other teachers what type of discipline they want you to use. This can be really helpful. So the biggest thing that I've been using as discipline is to send the student out of your classroom. If you're working with another teacher, the teachers that I work with, I've explained before, I have two different settings. At this school, I work closely with the teachers and take half the class and then switch them halfway through the hour. At the other school where I work, I have my own classes separately for an entire hour. So at the school where I'm working closely with the students, if I have a problem student, I just ask them to return to their teacher, and they leave and go back to her class. At the other school where I work, in order to ask them to leave, you have to send them to what's called la vie scolaire, which is like student life office, and vie scolaire deals with all the disciplinary problems. They contact the parents in France. French teachers do not ever contact parents about problem students. They have to go through the vie scolaire to do that. So if your students are causing a problem, you can tell them to go to the vie scolaire and send another student with them to accompany them. Not one of their friends, a student that you know will make sure that that's what they're doing, is going to the vie scolaire and not just skipping the rest of the class. I've also noticed that it works to threaten with vie scolaire. I have some students who kept talking, and I told them, if you can't be quiet, you'll have to go to the vie scolaire. And usually that works. So that is an idea, because they don't want to go there, because then their parents get notified that they were causing a problem in class. So another thing, smaller measures, before you actually send them out of the class, obviously you're going to ask them to be quiet, but sometimes they're just, it's not even that they have bad intentions, they're just too energetic and they keep getting distracted. What I tend to do, I have one class with about 6 boys who are very, very talkative, and I had to start separating them. So I asked them to move to a different seat, and now it's to the point where when they come into the class, before they even sit down, I tell each one of those boys where to sit. So that helps break it up a little bit. And another thing is, you have to be very firm. If you tell your students to do something and they say, no, but blah, blah, blah. This happens to me a lot when the first time I asked my students to move seats because they were talking too much. I said, okay, you guys are talking too much. You need to move and sit over there. And they say, no, we won't talk anymore. We won't talk anymore. Do not ever give them a second chance, because if you don't follow through with it, they will think that you are not firm in what you're saying and that you're not going to stick to it. So the first time you tell them to do something, there's no compromises on it. They have to move seats if that's what you told them to do. And I told, if they don't, then they can go to the vie scolaire. That's what I told him. When he said, no, we won't talk anymore, I said, well, you can move seats or you can go to the vie scolaire. You can choose. Another tip, sorry, this isn't very organized. I'm not very organized sometimes. Let's see. This is a tip I haven't used, but I've heard from other assistants, is that you can threaten to do more boring work in class. So if you're trying to make the class fun and do activities where the students are involved in speaking and stuff, that's really good. But sometimes when you're doing exciting activities, the students get excited and they talk too much. So you can tell them, listen, if you can't be quiet, we'll just do some grammar exercises or vocabulary lessons. So you can bring some handouts, and if they won't be quiet while you're doing the more fun activities, tell them to sit down, give them the handouts, and tell them they're not allowed to talk at all. And if one student talks, then you can send them out of the classroom. And I think if one student talks and you send them out, none of them are going to talk after that. I haven't done that. I haven't given them boring work to do, just because I'm a very patient person, and personally, it doesn't bother me so much if they talk. I'm more bothered by students refusing to do things. So if they're just talking and distracted, it's not malevolent to me. It's just teenagers. And if I go around the class and talk to them in English and they're actually responding to me, that's okay. If they are talking while I'm talking and they're just not caring about what we're talking about, that's a little different, and that is rude to me. So there's a difference. But for some people, there's not a difference. If you really just want them to pay attention and loud chatter bothers you, then you can deal with it your own way. For me, I'm pretty patient, so if they're talking a little bit, it doesn't bother me so much. Let's see. Another thing is just don't get freaked out. Like if they're being rude or loud, if you act like it really bothers you, they might just think it's funny. So don't get loud and start shouting at them. It just doesn't help. It just makes them think that you're easily bothered and they want to bother you more. And the most important thing is something my dad told me: don't take it personally, because when you think about it, they're just teenagers, they're just kids, and you're never going to see them again after this. Like if you're doing an assistant program, does it really matter? Like, and they're not doing it because they hate you. You know, I think back to when I was a teenager, and I liked my teachers, most of them. And I still talked in classes of teachers that I liked, and you know, you don't realize how annoying it really is when you're talking in class and your teacher's trying to do something. You just don't realize it when you're a teenager. So they're not doing it, most of the time they're not doing it just to be annoying, you know. So don't take it personally. It's not a personal attack on you. And a lot of the students are really, really like having assistants. My teachers have told me that my students, they always want to go to my class first. Like if we're doing it with the two groups, they're always like, oh, can our group go first? Can our group go first? Because they like being with the assistant. Usually it's not as strict or boring of topics as they're doing in their other class. Depends on what you choose to teach. But they like that, and they like being able to meet people from other cultures. So most of the time they will like the assistants, but you might not always notice it if they're just talking or, you know, distracted. But they do, most of the time, they do really like you. And I just don't take it personally. It does nothing for you if you go home and you just stress over what happened with a student in class. Alright, so I'm going to end it here, and I'll have part 2 linked in the description box below, where I'm going to talk about my biggest problem students that I've had so far. So you can check that out. All of those problems were resolved very nicely, so hopefully it'll encourage you guys. So my biggest tips are just, first of all, ask teachers if you don't know how to discipline your class. Ask the other teachers what to do. Sending the student out of the classroom is most effective because they don't like to be sent out. They get in trouble. Be firm and follow through with what you say. Don't let your students try to compromise with you. If you ask them to do something and they try to compromise, just tell them the choice is to do what you asked or to leave the classroom. And lastly, just don't take it personally, as I just mentioned. I hope that you guys liked this video and found it helpful. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you next time at part 2 linked in the description below. Thanks for watching. See ya. Bye.